So recently, one of the members of my congregation, Alice, shared a Buddhist teaching with me and said that she had been reading it in the mornings and it was helping her get through the day. So it goes something like this. On one occasion, the Buddha was at rest in Jeddah's grove. When the night had advanced, a certain spirit of stunning beauty, illuminating the entire grove, approached the Buddha. Having approached, he paid homage, stood to one side, and said, "How, dear sir, did you cross the flood?" "By not halting, friend, and by not straining, I crossed the flood." "But how is it, dear sir, that by not halting and by not straining, you crossed the flood?" "When I came to a standstill, I sank. When I struggled, I got swept away. It is in this way that by not halting and by not straining, I crossed the flood." The celestial being responded, "After a long time, at last, I see a Brahmin who is fully quenched, who by not halting, not straining, has crossed over attachment to the world." This is what the Spirit said. The teacher approved. Then the Spirit, thinking the teacher approved of me, paid homage once again, keeping him on the right, disappeared right there. So Alice shared this story and said that it had been helping her to answer the question of what do we do when we look at the state of the world, at the cruelty and the pain happening in so many lives. How do we hold it all without falling into despair? This teaching meant a lot to her, and I will be honest with you that the first time I heard it, all I was left with was a lot of confusion. So I did some digging into what is the meaning of this whole thing, and here's what I found. The flood here represents life itself, the flood of our existence, the flood of all that happens to us in the span of our years, the fear, the worry, the helplessness, all that overwhelms and threatens to drown us. The question of crossing the flood can really be asked in the face of all we encounter in these lives of ours. What are we to do? The question wasn't, how do we stop the flood? How do we avoid the flood? How do we keep the flood from happening? It was, how do we cross the flood? Because we know the storms and troubles of life will come, how do we endure? And the answer comes by not halting and by not straining. When we stop, we sink. When we struggle, we get swept away. What then do we do? My interpretation of this teaching is that to stop when we are in the flood is to give in to the depths of despair. Despair is a reasonable reaction to the world we live in. I feel it when my 13-year-old becomes fascinated with a creature that is new to him and then asks if I think it will still be here when he's grown up. I feel it when I see the never-ending news articles of climate disasters, or see the daily briefings that include attacks on LGBTQ and BIPOC lives, and on immigrants, the ones desperately wanting to build a new life here in a country of seeming abundance. When I learn more and more about the violence, the hatred, and the anger here at home and around the globe. When I feel it most deeply, I realize that despair is the kind of thing that creeps up and grows when I'm not paying attention. And suddenly there's so much of it that I'm sinking into the waters of the flood. Viktor Frankl, the psychotherapist, author, and Holocaust survivor, drew on his own experience when he said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way. Despair is problematic in many ways. It makes us believe that the here and now is all there is and all that ever will be, that the future is already written and inevitable. It stops us from seeing what is possible and stops our will to keep fighting, keep marching, keep writing, keep trying, because what is the point? Despair is a self-fulfilling prophecy. We know we can't win, so we give up and we give away our agency. Despair makes it all the more likely that our worst fears will come to pass because we feel all the other choices are gone. Yet Frankl was right when he said we must remember that we can choose our way. We can choose our response to what is happening in our homes, our communities, our world. Looking for the glimmers of hope and possibility, the small victories we see, the people organizing and marching, politicians listening. My dearest friend from college was just elected to her local school board. Seeing young people who know and feel in their very selves the dangers of this world, and yet they still choose to act. As the environmental activist and author Donella Meadows said, there is too much bad news to justify complacency. There's too much good news to justify despair. If we stop, we sink. But what about the struggle? How do we not get swept away in it all? I think we all know the struggle that this teaching is referring to. All those moments in our lives when we want things to be different, when we want life to be different, when our lives and this world are very much not to our liking. We push it away, we fight against it, and we struggle. Alice also shared with me a poem from Wendell Berry. I go among trees and sit still. All my stirring becomes quiet. Around me like circles on water. My tasks lie in their places where I left them asleep like cattle. Then what is afraid of me comes and lives a while in my sight. What it fears in me leaves me, and the fear of me leaves it. It sings, and I hear its song. Then what I am afraid of comes. I live for a while in its sight. What I fear in it leaves it, and the fear of it leaves me. It sings, and I hear its song. After days of labor, mute in my consternations, I hear my song at last, and I sing it. As we sing, the day turns, the trees move. What I love about this poem is the realization that we need to acknowledge, to name, and to spend a moment with what we fear, with our struggle. It may feel counterintuitive or too frightening to even imagine. We run from our fears, we try to avoid them, we distract ourselves any way we can. We struggle against them, and sometimes we drown. What is the other way? The physician, author, and teacher Rachel Naomi Remen told the following story. Of all the ways that people commonly deal with suffering, denial, rationalization, substitution, few of those are places of refuge. Most will disconnect us from the very life we hope to bless and serve, and may defeat us in fulfilling the purpose of our lives. The sad part of this is that we can never hide from suffering. Suffering is a part of being alive. Hiding ourselves means only that we will end up suffering alone. In the presence of suffering, everyone needs to find a refuge. The difficulty we have in knowing where to find our strength came home to me when I taught a group of beginning medical students a class on genetic diseases. The woman who had generously agreed to be interviewed for the class was a young mother who had recently discovered that she carried a gene that would arrest the brain growth of both of her young children. Her loss was beyond words, its dimensions instantly understandable by mothers since the beginning of time. I wondered how she would find a way to go on. And sitting there, listening to her tell her story, I began to silently pray for her. The students in this class were young, and I wasn't sure how they were going to respond. Immediately after she left the room, there was, in fact, a moment of silence when something genuine, intimate, and profoundly human was in our midst. Sadly, it disappeared as the students rushed to a discussion of the disease that had caused the tragedy. For the next half hour, they analyzed, they labeled, they shared research data and vast amounts of information and knowledge. Slowly, I began to understand that the suffering we had witnessed had far exceeded the life experience in the room. No one had yet accumulated the wisdom to respond to it or the strength to be present in the face of it. Confronted by something so vast and so impervious to all medical expertise, the students were struggling to contain it by understanding the pathology. They had sought refuge from suffering in their science. But life doesn't work that way. Science is not a place of refuge. It cannot protect us from suffering. Hiding from suffering will only make us more afraid. It's a lesson that I learned from one of our members a little over 20 years now. The congregation that I serve in Madison was suffering from the massive and sudden loss of one of our parents, someone who had been involved with the creation of our new building. His kids were young. His family was devastated, and we were all reeling from shock and grief. And his family called me to visit. I headed across the street to the UW hospital with one of our longtime members who was currently co-chairing a team with this man. We walked into a room of tear-streaked faces, and she immediately began hugging his parents, wrapping her arms around his wife, talking gently and softly, saying how sorry we all were. It was a moment of beauty and mercy and grace. When we left the hospital that day, I turned to her and said, "How did you do that? How did you just walk in there and know what to say?" And she said, "When you get to be my age, you've been through a lot. You're going to be hurt. You're going to be wounded. You're going to be scarred and left in pieces. And when you can learn to love your own pieces, you're just naturally going to love the pieces of others. You know that they're in pain too, and all you can do is love them well." We avoid suffering only at the great cost of distancing ourselves from one another and life. In order to live fully, we need to look deeply and respectfully at our own suffering and at the suffering around us. In the depths of every wound we have survived is the strength we need to live. The wisdom our wounds can offer us is a place of refuge. Finding this is not for the faint of heart, but then again, neither is life. One of the things that's been getting me through the recent days has been the poetry of Rosemary Watola-Trommer. Rosemary will send a daily poem to your inbox if you sign up. And if this sounds like something that would help you, I can't encourage you enough to do it. On Friday, Rosemary wrote a poem titled "Please." If you are one who has practiced meeting the pain of the world, we need you. Right now, we need you to teach us it is possible to swallow what is weighty and still be able to rise. We need you to remind us we can be furious and scared and near feral over injustice and still thrill at the taste of a strawberry, ripe and sweet. Can still meet a stranger and shake their hand, believing in their humanness. We need you to show us how we too can fall into the darkest, unplumbed pit and learn there a courage and beauty we could never learn from the light. If you have drowned in sorrow and still have somehow found a way to breathe, please lead us. You are the one with the crumbs we need, the ones we will use to find our way back to the home of our hearts. This life is complicated, difficult, and we can easily get swept away. To resist despair and sit with suffering, we need one another. We need each other for the long haul ahead. The last thing Alice and I spoke about in our brief conversation was my time in Madison. This is the end of my 25th year now. And knowing the average pastorate is somewhere around 7 years, Alice was curious how we've managed to stay together so long. That's quite a bit of relational perseverance, she joked. She's not wrong, and she answered her own question. The 24, 25-ish years I've had in Madison now have worked because we've been in it together. As someone shared with me recently about UU congregations, you know what I love about these places? We are so darn awkward. And we're brave. Isn't that amazing? We can be awkward and brave together. Friends, as we look at the months and the years ahead, as we meet daily atrocities, we have every right to assess it as bleak. We can remember that nothing is inevitable, and we don't know where the floods will carry us. There will be major social upheavals ahead. The rapids of these waters will bring pain and suffering and also incredible opportunities to change. People will be moved, outraged, and transformed. As we look out at the years ahead, we have every right to also remember the world will not stop being beautiful, not stop having sunrises and full moons, light pouring through clouds, and while some places may be scarred or drowned and for a time lifeless, in others, seeds will break through soil, flowers will bloom, and birds will soar. Rather than pretend we know how this is going to end, let's do the one thing we know how to do. Join together and build institutions that provide people with a vehicle for belonging, meaning, support, change, and refuge. May we remember today and in all the days to come to feel the despair and do not stop, to feel the grief and do not struggle. The choices are yours to make. Be awkward and brave, and believe in relational perseverance. I think we call that love.